Okay. Thanks, Kevin. Welcome, everyone, to the CEC meeting for February 2025. As always at our meetings, we have interpretation in Arabic, Mandarin, and Spanish. You should see video of those interpreters and their names listed in the chat, in the participant list. Those interpreters will now provide their instructions for anyone who would like to use interpretation services. Could our Arabic interpreter please introduce yourself?
مساء الخير. أنا المترجمة ليلى المرزوقي، وسأقوم بترجمة هذا الاجتماع باللغة العربية. وللأولياء الأمور وعائلات التي تتكلم باللغة العربية، إذا أردتم سماع هذا الاجتماع عليكم بطلب الرقم 347-966-4114، ثم يتبع برقم التعريف 684-006-024، ويتبع برمز الشباك. مرة ثانية، إذا أردتم السماع لهذا الاجتماع باللغة العربية عليكم طلب الرقم 347-966-4114، ثم يتبع بالرقم التعريف 684-006-024، ويتبع برمز الشباك. وشكرا.
Thank you. Could our Mandarin interpreter please introduce yourself?
Will be the Mandarin announcement. 各位大家好，如果想听中文，请拨打347-966-4114，ID 号码是618-616-5189。重复一次，347-966-4114， ID 号码是618-616-5189。谢谢。Mandarin announcement complete.
Thank you. Could our Spanish interpreter please introduce yourself?
Good evening, this is the Spanish introduction. Para las personas que desean escuchar este audio en español o la conferencia en español, favor de marcar el número de teléfono 347-966-4114 e ingrese la clave 833-563-028. Repito, para las personas que desean escuchar esta conferencia en español, por favor marque el número de teléfono 347-966-4114 e ingresa la clave 833-563-028 más el signo del número. Si desea permanecer en esta conferencia, usted debe de bajar lo que es el volumen de su computador y silenciar su micrófono en su teléfono para no interrumpir la interpretación. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a reminder for those of us speaking tonight, please try to keep in mind that we have interpretation occurring, and if possible, try to moderate how fast you are speaking. We're here tonight at IS 201, the Madeleine Brennan School. Thanks to Principal Rob Chula for hosting us here. We'll now go over the agenda for tonight. And I should be able to share that. Right? Okay. So tonight's meeting, we'll have our first public speaking session. Then we're going to be joined by Director of School Security, Director Mark Rampersant. We'll have report of Superintendent Dr. David Preto on the fair student funding, report of Council President, second public speaking session, 2 resolutions, one an anti-bullying resolution and resolution on adding geometry. And that will be the conclusion of the calendar meeting. The business meeting will immediately follow. So for our first, and I do want to take a minute and just recognize a few guests in addition to our superintendent, Dr. Preto. We have the school staff, family leadership coordinator, Bill Chin, here in person with us, family support coordinator, Sylvia Jasinski, as always at our meetings. I also want to note a few representatives from elected officials who have joined us, Andrew Suarato from Assemblyman Michael Tanusis' office, as well as Tony Krupchen from Councilman Justin Brennan's office. If there are others here, and I do see our CSA representative, Lisa Fung Fernandez here. So thank you all for attending. And if there are other representatives from elected officials, please feel free to identify yourself in the chat. Ina? Hi, Ina. Our face liaison, Ina Krasinski, is here, and we do appreciate her being here in person, which is not always common with face liaisons. But so thank you, Ina. Let's go to our first public speaking session. Looks like we have three. First of all, is there anyone in person to speak in pub for speaking? Great. So, yeah.
Laptop right there.
And we'll call up, so is it? Cyrus Clancy Baker? And just to run through there's the 3 minutes for speaking. Yeah, and otherwise the floor is yours.
It's going to ask you to unmute, and you just press yes, and then you can start.
Hi, my name is Cyrus Finton Clancy Baker, and I currently attend PS 682, the Academy of Talented Scholars, and today I will be talking about the HMH curriculum into reading. On September 5th, 2023, my school and the rest of the schools in District 20 face a huge change, and you may be wondering what type of change, and I will explain. The change I am talking about is the worst change possible, a curriculum change. All of District 20 has been forced to change their current curriculum to HMH into reading. I want you to know 3 things about into reading. Number 1, nobody else is here probably to talk about math or science, only reading. No kids would rather come to school board meetings than play video games, but here I am. This curriculum is so bad that even an 11-year-old would rather come to school board meetings instead of scrolling TikTok reels. Number 2, the point of reading is to make you a better citizen. HMH only teaches us to take more tests. People may say that HMH improves test scores, and they would be absolutely incorrect. Instead, the overall statistics of standardized test results in the whole city show that a 2.6% drop, while math scores are flying with the boards with a 3.14% increase in test results. I'm not sure about you, but I don't want a curriculum that can't promise what they say it can. Finally, I am in 5th grade, going into the middle school next year, and I purposely ranked first. I ranked BSI, the Brooklyn School of Inquiry. I ranked Mark Twain because they used our own curriculum. Applications to free HMH. That is how worse this curriculum is compared to Teachers College. In conclusion, if you want to go into the future with a terrible reputation caused by even worse curriculums, keep District 20 this way. But please, if anything, walk a mile in District 20's shoes and experience this horrible curriculum in progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. We appreciate you coming out to speak as a student. It's really admirable of you, so thank you. Next speaker is Kelly Clancy.
I'm Kelly Clancy. My son Cyrus just spoke, and I'm also the mom of 2 other kiddos in District 20. And although I completely agree with everything my son just said about HMH and how it's really been negative, I wanted to talk about something else tonight, which is that I really have been very upset and worried about the conversation about education on a national level. And I wanted to come here tonight to ask the school board to be brave. And I know that's a tough thing to do, but I will say that like my kid shows me how to be brave every day. He wants to keep talking about HMH and this curriculum and how it's not serving his needs. And I'm really proud of him for doing that. And it's something that I see it with these kids across the district, is that they're willing to stand up for bravery. And I will say that one of the reasons that we live in Brooklyn is because of the fact that we wanted to raise our kids in the most diverse city in the country. And we not only wanted to raise our kids in a city that was diverse, but in a city that deeply valued diversity. And my husband and I are very worried about the fact that there's going to be a lot of pressure on New York City to begin to roll back a lot of diversity initiatives. And a lot of it will be under the guise of parent choice. And I want to tell you as a parent that I will really appreciate everything that the school board can do to push back against these initiatives. And so what that means, I think, is continuing to loudly proclaim that our schools are places for everybody, including kiddos who are undocumented, including kids who are trans or non-binary or gay, including kids who come from diverse families and celebrate diverse holidays. And the other thing that I'll say is that I think there's been this real sense that if we give a little bit, so Eric Adams says, well, ICE can come in as long as you feel threatened, it's okay, that they'll leave us alone. And I think that what you see is the exact opposite. Like if you are brave from the get-go, that is when you're able to protect all of the kids who need protecting. And as soon as you give a little bit, that's when they come after everything related to diversity. And so I don't want to send my kids to schools where you can't talk about Black people, or you can't talk about women, where you can't talk about gay families. All of the things that are being banned from being spoken about on the national level or being banned from talked about in higher ed, that's going to come here. And so I wish there were 50 parents here tonight, but I wanted to be the first parent to stand up and say, that's not the schools we want to send our kids to. We're proud of the diversity in New York City, and everything that the administration can do to loudly proclaim that and also to protect every kid in the district, that is what we hope that you will do. And thank you for being here, and thank you for your service. And we'll keep coming to these meetings. So thanks.
And then I believe no one else in person for speaking, right? I don't believe so. And then online, it looks like we have one person signed up online. Yeah, Chunxia Yang. We'll just look online and see. Okay. Am I pronouncing that right? Can someone tell me? Chunxia, Chunxia Yang? Chunxia, last name Yang.
Should I unmute myself?
Yeah, they signed up to speak if they want to speak.
Okay. Hey, Chunxia Yan, yeah. Can I open Chinese? 你可以用中文讲，如果你需要讲中文的话。
Okay.
She sent a message.
Say that again, Kevin.
She sent a message in the chat saying,
Oh,
how can I open Chinese?
there's a Chinese interpreter.
And she can make her comment through the interpreter if she wants to.
Okay. Can she hear me when I speak now?
Yeah.
Okay. 你好，这位家长，你可以直接用中文讲，然后待会儿你翻译。线上有那个翻译员。
因为你们说的我听不懂，我想翻译。
She's speaking now. 请稍等一下，我们现在听不清你讲话。Kevin, she's speaking.
Yeah, I don't know what she said. She spoke, but then
Did you try again?
yeah, we didn't hear the first one.
She's muted now, right?
Yeah, she unmuted and muted herself. Yeah.
OK， 麻烦你再试一下。
这位家长，麻烦你再试一下。
我要录。
好，我们现在听到你说话了，请继续。
好，
请讲。
我想听到有国语的翻译，我不知道怎么按。
你是想登录那个国语的线是不是？
没错。
OK，你今天要，Yeah，go ahead please。Sophia，go ahead。
如果想这加入国语的线吼，你现在听得到吗？
可以。
是打那个电话，你打那个电话347966411，然后 ID 号码是918，对不起618616518。
哦，好，我试一下。
这位家长，你刚才是我们看到说你准备要做个发言，是不是？
是我看到这
She's
个。
trying to dial into the Chinese line.
At least you sign up to the public speaking as well.
If she wants to speak, she can speak now.
I'm asking her.
Yeah.
您刚才是准备要做一个发言，对不对？那么你现在可以讲话，可以直接发言。
我只是听不懂你们讲话，所以说我想问一下怎么进入中文翻译。
I think the parent just she's asking how to get on the Chinese. I already gave her the instruction, and she said, yeah, she wanted to speak, but she just want to listen to the Chinese translation.
She doesn't need to make a public speech. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Sophia. Okay. 谢谢这位家长。
All right, no problem.
We can move on to the next one.
Good. All right, thanks. Anyone else signed up?
No.
Not at the moment. Okay. So let's move along to the next item on the agenda. Is Chief Rampersant on? Mr. Rampersant, are you on? And if so, sir, the floor is yours. We're very grateful for your time and for being here, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. So you can unmute and.
I'm going to be sharing my screen with Chief Rampersant. Can you give me access to do that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, are you guys able to hear me?
Yes.
Loud and clear.
Yep, thumbs up. Thank you very much. I'm having some technical difficulty, but I do have my partner here who will introduce himself shortly. Again, my name is Mark Rampersant. I'm the Chief of Safety and Prevention Partnerships for New York City Public Schools. David, want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for having us. David Barone. I support the Respect for All and anti-bullying and bias-based harassment.
Next slide. So first and foremost, thank you for allowing us an opportunity to share this space with you and be a thought partner as you propose your resolution of which you want to have considered. I appreciate you just allowing us to share a little bit with you. We'll be really brief, go over a little bit of what we do as it relates to bullying, chancellor's regulations, and we'll talk briefly about safety transfers, of which we know that you're very interested in. Next slide, please. It's super important that you are reminded, that at the Office of Safety and Prevention Partnerships, we remain committed to ensuring that our school communities are safe and secure and supportive learning environments. We don't only focus on the physical safety of our schools, we focus on the emotional safety. And for us, that equals complete safety, right? So we're not only the school safety agents, the scanning machines and we are also the support of our guidance counselors, social workers, school counselors, our social workers, our CBO partners, our community based organizations that help provide support for our young people as well. That is the very work that we are committed to doing in this space. Next slide. All of our communities deserve to be a safe and supportive learning environment that is free of discrimination, harassment, intimidation, and/or bullying. This is not only a buzzword for us, this is action. We do lots of work in training our schools to ensure that we are ensuring that our young people have a safe and supportive learning environment. Next slide. So harassment, discrimination, and/or bullying. New York City Public Schools is committed to providing a safe and supportive learning environment, as I've just shared. There is no place of bullying of any kind accepted in New York City Public Schools, and our schools have no choice but to take every single complaint of bullying, harassment, or intimidation seriously, as outlined in our chancellor's regulations, which addresses student-to-student harassment, intimidation, and/or bullying. This is not an option for our school. This regulation governs the way by which our educators respond to bullying in schools. And this regulation is aligned with the New York State Dignity for All Students Act, better known to some of you as DASA. Next slide. So, New York City Public Schools is obligated to provide a report on our student-to-student bullying harassment, and this includes our sexual harassment, intimidation, and discrimination. We are required to submit this report twice a year, on May 31st and on November 30th. For school year 1920, New York City Public Schools, we've updated our business rules to collect data to include additional infraction codes. So we went from 22 infractions to 44. Right, so we were intentional about increasing the number of infractions that would, in fact, be considered bullying. We introduced our online bullying complaint tool, where parents can actually report bullying directly from their cell phones, and that will automatically ignite an ORS report at the school level that requires the principal to get in touch with the reporter in a certain number of days, investigate, and then come back with a final disposition of which must be shared with the person making the respective complaint. In 23-24 school year, when compared to the year prior, the number of bullying complaints increased by 3%. We expected this. We increased the number of codes that would qualify to be under the bullying complaint area. So we expected to see an increase. As it relates to the violations, we saw a 2% increase. And in District 20, the number of bullying complaints increased by 6.4%, and the violations increased by 5.7% during that year. Again, we expected to see an increase as we widened the net for infractions that would qualify under the respective bullying code. We did more training. We did more professional development opportunities for schools offered to parents. We did lots of work with our superintendents to get the messaging out around these codes and what qualified in the bullying category. And we talked more about being intentional about the supports provided. Next slide. All right. In a situation of bullying, harassment, which led to a consideration of a student transfer. This sounds like a recommendation from your folks regarding on transfers for safety transfers for bullying. Let me talk a little bit about this respective regulation 8449 for safety transfers. This regulation set forth the respective procedures that grants a safety transfer. When a student is a victim of a violent crime that took place on our school property, in another situation when a student it is determined that a student is continuously feeling unsafe in school as a result of a bullying situation, intimidation, or harassment, this is when a safety transfer is considered. It is very important to understand that, as outlined in Chancellor's Regulation 450, an involuntary transfer process It is governed by a number of very, very important steps that are taken. For a one-time bullying incident, we don't necessarily sort of send the kid to another school because there was an incident between two students. There are a number of factors that must be considered. No student with an IEP can be considered. This is a K-12 decision. It is for general education students only. So it is super important that we understand that when these situations take place and certain information is not shared with the parent of the victim, and I'll use the term victim loosely here, for the victim, that when the response is not automatically that the aggressor gets a safety transfer, it should not be perceived that the school is not doing everything within their power. It's super important that you understand the process and understand that the involuntary safety process is a request made by the principal, and a number of factors must be in place before we can even consider that conversation. Again, this does not include our students with an IEP. It is super important that we understand that. Right, David, you want to take the next slide?
Yeah. So looking at the 3 additional CEC 20 recommendations, you recommended that we review all existing disciplinary policies and based on quantitative and qualitative data, determine what policies are most effective at reducing bullying, harassment, discrimination, and review ineffective policies and make changes recognizing that there is no one-size-fits-all policy for different schools. As Chief Rampersad stated, we have expanded our bullying codes from 22 to 44 to prompt additional potential material incidents related to bullying. We also have superintendent meetings conducted monthly, meetings with superintendent teams to share best practices tailored to each district, informing policy decisions. We have individual support plans that a school can put in place for a victim of bullying, but when a student is identified as a repeat victim in a second time, ORS requires that the school implements the individual support plan for that student, and the use of these ISPs has led to a reduction in additional incidents for most students. We also have the ORS parent platform, which introduced to address underreporting in school incidents. Now, when a parent submits a report, it automatically generates an ORS report for the school. Moving on to additional recommendation from CEC 20, New York City Public Schools prioritizes supporting schools with the highest rates of material incidents reported under Local Law 51. We analyze bullying data and student perception surveys to identify targeted needs and supports for schools. With that targeted support, we do identify a top 30 schools in need and provide direct restorative services for those schools. We also have a restorative justice team that delivers direct supports from that group of adults that are in all 5 boroughs to additional identified schools outside of that top 30. We offer professional development. We partner with Common Sense to offer citywide trainings on cyberbullying. Each school has a RFA liaison who must attend a mandated training on Chancellor's Regulation A832, and which informs on bullying and cyberbullying and harassment. Additionally, all students must complete mandated bullying prevention workshops by October 31st, and all staff must attend and complete required bullying prevention workshops by October 31st. Your last recommendation, follow-up program survey is taken of students at the end of each school year in order to verify that they have retained the content knowledge from the annual mandated anti-bullying training. Superintendent teams have the access to district-specific data to support schools based on their needs. Principals attest by October 31st each year that the RFA liaison received the training on Chancellor's Reg A832, and the students and the staff have received the required bullying training. Individual schools are responsible for tracking the annual delivery of those mandated trainings. Schools are responsible for assessing the effectiveness of training and how well students retain that information. They do not only have to do this training once, they could do it repeated. All school staff has access to the required trainings and resources on the New York City Public School Info Hub, and our students have access to additional trainings through our restorative practice teams in community building tier 1, peer mediation, and access to all of our youth programs. I'm going to turn it back to you, Mark.
So council, it's very important that you understand that we don't come to you today from a place of we know it all, we've done it all, we have it all. We have the golden star to address all of our respecting bullying problems, or to solve every bullying problem throughout the city that may exist. What we will say to you is that we continue to do the work to ensure safety for our students, and every single case of bullying is taken very seriously. We put in additional measures to ensure that there is a lot of referral. There's a referral process. Anytime a parent feels like a bullying case was not handled properly, or the response that they got from a school may not be, in line with the discipline code. It's important to understand that there are various steps that you can take, including contacting the superintendent for a follow-up and follow-through. Again, schools do not have the choice to not report bullying in the OR system. As my partner just shared, parents now have the ability to start a bullying report that goes directly into the school's OR system, which is the only state recognized system of record that will then start the report, and each school is required to get back to that parent or that reporter with a disposition as it relates to their respective findings after an investigation is done. And as my partner shared, outside of an investigation, depending on the number of times the young person has been a victim of bullying, the school has to have an individual plan, a safety plan to support that young person. And that consists of a number of things, including a regular check-in with a guidance counselor or another caring adult in the building, which is documented. The students' feelings are also documented. There are conversations around how this person is feeling and whether they feel safe in the school community, and how else the school can support this young person if they've had any other respective challenges. So that is pretty much our sharing. We look forward to a robust conversation with you, sir. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you today.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you both, Chief Rampersant and David. And I'm sure my colleagues have questions too. I just want to lead off with a few. One question, the data that you cited on the change in incidents from in 2023, 2024, if you want, you can go back to that slide. But I was just curious, how does that data, is that data taken from the, is that OR's reporting data?
Online occurrence reporting system, yes.
And I think I just saw there, did it have, and is that the data that goes, so that goes to local law 51. I have different numbers for District 20. I show the incidents declined for District 20 under local law 51 in 23, 24. So I was just surprised to see your data there. I mean, this is coming from, I took my data from the DOE website where all the local law 51 reports are filed. And is there something I'm missing here? Or
yeah, Gina, you want to speak to this respective data, or David, you want to speak to the data and why we're seeing a difference? Where did you pull yours from, President?
From the website, from the DOE website, where they've got the links to each 6 months. I think it is twice a year, and I could actually pull it up if it's helpful. Actually, I don't think it's a good use of the meeting time to go through that, but
you'll stay connected with us, and we'll compare the data and we'll clarify for you ours versus yours, and you can share with the rest of the council. Fair enough?
Yeah. And actually, if you guys have, maybe while we're talking, maybe if someone could look up, because I show 581 material incidents of bullying, harassment, and discrimination in District 20 in the school year 2023-24. So maybe if you guys can, what's your absolute number? It might just be an interesting reference point.
Yeah, so we always use percentages, not actual numbers, but we can definitely break that down for you, and then get back to you. All right?
Okay, and like I said, I show a decline, so I show a percentage decline.
Yep.
But then overall, in my big picture question for you, for you guys is, I hear what you're saying, and you guys have some policies in place, and it's sort of common to when we talk about these policy issues, the New York City Public Schools, they come in and they give us what the policies in place are, and we know you guys work hard day in, day out. We don't doubt that. There's still this trend, and you can correct me if you're looking at different data, but I still have, as in our resolution, incidents are going up in New York City Public Schools, and enrollment is also going down over this time period. And so we're seeing increasing incidents on a smaller student base, and that's concerning. And I guess just high level, do you have any kind of response to that? Is it sort of the same way you view things?
So it's definitely data that we constantly look at, right? Well, we shared with you that we identify the top 30 schools that are showing the greatest increase, especially in the area of bullying, and we offer additional supports. One of the things that we need to consider is that we had a very unfortunate time this past year. Thank God it's over, right? With the unfortunate October incident that occurred, right? And whilst the young people are young people. Some have not so great intentions, and they do things that they are sorry for later, right? So our incidents in schools always reflect what's happening outside. I appreciate you pointing out the fact that we have all of these respective systems in place, but we are always looking for other ways by which we can ensure safety for young people in schools. And it's important that we have partners such as yourself that can help A, hold us accountable, and then B, more importantly, be a thought partner in this space and offer different innovative ideas by which we can address, right? And so again, we can take this by school to see where the real increases are. We do look at recidivism as well, right? More than one student may be responsible for multiple incidents. And these are the things that help us determine where we're directing our respective supports.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue to my next question, because very often when we have these conversations about education, it comes back to sort of general terms like supports and resources. And I always like trying to drill down a little bit. What does that mean? What are the supports that we're talking about in this case specifically?
Absolutely. So some of the supports that centrally, we have a group of social workers and or school counselors that we can direct to schools to provide direct supports and services to that respective schools, especially if we have one student who is recidivist, right? We can provide direct supports in that respect. Our restorative justice team, who have been super effective in going into schools and helping to resolve issues, whether it's bullying, intimidation, harassment, or otherwise. They've been helpful in that space. I know that David talked about a group that we contract with, that they do push in schools and provide support. We work with various community-based organizations that we redirect into schools where we see they have the greatest number of incidents occurring. And we work with our student services staff from the superintendent's office that push in the area of climate and culture, just to ensure that the schools have the most effective systems in place. And if they don't, we contract out and provide those supports for them. We also go to schools and we conduct our own respective assessments to ensure that there are these opportunities for young people to be unsupervised, and where these bullying situations happen, help them to rectify those respective situations.
Steve, may I? I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Maya.
Hi.
Absolutely.
Hi.
Yeah.
It's going to be a few things. Thank you for the report. Let's name things by the name, right? October incident is the attack on Israel. And the incidents are anti-Semitic incidents that took place all over. District 20 is the hot spot in a way, because we have large Muslim community and we have large Jewish community, and these kids go to public school. So incidents were Muslim child, in Fort Hamilton High School, chasing Jewish child with scissors, and staff didn't do anything to protect the child. And then the problem was that there is such a huge bureaucracy buildup, processes and procedures. And trust me, I work in finance, I'm in regulatory reporting. You hide, the schools administrations were hiding behind endless bureaucratic procedures. They would not, it's such a buildup that there is no way to get to the core. I haven't heard the end of any stories, any reports. And other child in middle school in District 20 was receiving messages on the phone. Hi, this is your gas camera. Come, it's Auschwitz calling you. These kind of things happen in District 20. And I haven't heard, moms would come to me and complain. And this is a stress test for all the policies and procedures in place. And I am sad to say that they failed to protect children. Moms came to me. I'm Jewish. I have Jewish community that comes to me. They came to me many times saying they feel unsafe, and some moms choose to pull kids out of school. So I just want to say that that was a stress test, and it's very worrying, to be honest, that this procedures do not. I understand there is all kind of buildup, all kind of policies, all kind of services, but all of this prevented school to effectively react and punish and be very assertive with people who with kids who who were bullying. So just wanted to share.
So thank you for that. We appreciate your position on that, ma'am. We can definitely agree to disagree in this space, and I say respectfully agree to disagree. One of the things that I will continue to reiterate is schools are required to take every one of these cases very seriously. New York City Public Schools went one step further. We met with our faith-based leaders to talk about different ways and different things that we can put in place to support all of our young people, regardless to religious background or otherwise. We were intentional about creating a team, a meeting the moment team that consists of an attorney, 2 attorneys, and some additional school staff, so that when we do have cases of Islamophobia or anti-Semitism, they are handled separately by a team that is addressing and providing the direct context and supports to principals to ensure that they're handling these cases accurately and with a swift response. And unfortunately, every one of these incidents doesn't require a disciplinary sanction. And when we think disciplinary, we think suspension, we think transfer, and all of the different things that people request. But every one of these cases is a learning opportunity for our schools to teach our young people, teach our young people to be respectful of all. And we are intentional, and we'll continue to be intentional in those respective spaces. But I appreciate your sharing, ma'am. I respect your sharing. And I hope that you will see greater response and follow-up through the respective schools that you're dealing with. If there's any particular school in concern for you, we'll be more than happy to visit that school and give it the additional attention that it may or may not require.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chief Emerson, back to a couple of times you mentioned policies that are effective. And I think you most recently, you said of making sure that schools have effective systems in place. What are some examples? What are some examples of effective school safety and anti-bullying policies? And what are examples of some that are not effective?
So not effective is what was just described by the individual who just spoke, is when schools are not responding to cases of bullying seriously. What is not effective is not at the front door. Students are not welcomed by a caring and loving staff when they enter the building. It is not effective if every student in the building doesn't know the respect for all liaison and there's not signage posted throughout the building telling you who that person is and when that person is available to you. It is not effective when young people don't have at least one caring adult that they can go to if they feel uncomfortable, they feel uneasy because of any harassment, intimidation, or bullying. It is not effective when there is not print-rich systems throughout the building guiding our students to all of the respective practices that exist throughout our entire school system. It's not effective when we depend solely on the uniformed school safety agent at the front desk to be responsible for safety and security in our school. As I shared out originally, we are not only concerned about the physical safety, but we're concerned about the emotional safety of our students as well. And that is the evidence of caring and loving adults throughout the building. So those are some of the areas.
Right. And I guess, have you seen, like, it's interesting when you're mentioning the 30 schools, and this is, when you say 30 schools, that's citywide, right? That's in all of New York City.
Top 30, yes.
They're like the priority. Okay. You know, obviously, you know, I'd love it if you could mention some of the schools specifically, but I'm more curious about the policies that have been shown to work and success stories, or not, if you'd like to speak candidly and say, what are some things that have been tried that haven't worked in some of these hotspots?
So some of the things that may not work is if the outcome is not satisfactory to the parent, right? If the expectation for the parent is that the response from New York City Public School is to remove every young person that commits an infraction, that's not going to work. The process that doesn't allow for communities to come in and be a part of the solution, as opposed to standing on the outside and just being perceived as the problem. Right? Practices work when you involve the community in education for young people. And when I say that, I mean the safety, right? Policies work when you don't stand alone as a school system, right? In the middle of a community that's responsible for raising, keeping a child safe, nurturing, supporting, and otherwise, right? Because what's interesting, sir, is our New York City public schools are even responsible for what happens at the household. So if something happens on the weekend, and on social media, and all of those things that you are well familiar with, it becomes the responsibility of the principal. So it requires a community to address those issues because the principal can only be responsible for what they're responsible for, and that's the inside of the school, the perimeter of the school. They need collective support of the respective community to ensure the safety and security and well-being for our young people as they transition through the neighborhoods and when they're on weekends. Right? I want to share a quick story with you, if I may, without giving you the name or the school, but a young person was found sleeping outside of a New York City public schools on one of the coldest days of this past couple of weeks. Found outside at 2 a.m., sleeping outside of a school by a passerby, right? NYPD got this young person, and they found the reason why the young person left the house. And when I say young, I mean 8 years old. And the young person shared the reason why they went to school is when the doors open, that they would get to see their guidance counselors. When we offer nurturing, welcoming environments for our kids, when our young people are in trouble, the place that they go is to schools, right? And if you have all of the systems which are just described, schools work well. Schools work well, but we can't do this work without our community partners. And our community partners are not only our businesses and our faith-based organizations, but it's our parents and our community-based organizations as well.
Yeah, I guess the point, oh, did you have a question, Kat?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead. One of our council members would like to ask another question.
Should I unmute or speak?
Give me 1 second. Huh? 1 second. Okay, you can unmute it.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for the report and the explanation. I just have two quick questions. I mean, first of all, we are talking about physical bullying now. I mean, I hear you mention about mental health, but let's stay the topic with narrow one, and we continue on that. For the physical bullying, like incidents we just mentioned before, I just wondering what school will you do different to, one, to prevent this from happening. Two, what will school to do after fact if that happens, if that incident happens again, what school will do better, and what action they're going to do?
So thank you for the question, sir. It is not about what schools are going to do. It's about the systems that exist in schools currently, right? And I'll say again, if you are hearing from parents that there is a particular school that you are concerned about, please raise that to our level, and we will make sure that we're pushing in to ensure that those systems exist. Number one, your question is, what is schools going to do about the presence of physical bullying? It's education. It's advising our students of how to properly act within a school. It's ensuring that there are constant reminders that horseplaying and bullying and all of the things that lead to these kinds of complaints are not happening. It's supervision throughout the school. It's the introduction and the presence of all of the amazing activities that our schools offer through after-school programs, day programs, sports teams, and otherwise. It is the clear and present, constant caring adults that are throughout the building. It's the opening the door to offer for any young person a caring adult who will take their report of bullying seriously. It's creating spaces where young people don't hold things to themselves, that they feel confident that schools are going to do something when they tell them something. It is in fact super important to remember that we are a very, very large school system, not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and we can always do better. And we always welcome these kinds of forums and these thought partners to help us to create other more innovative ideas by which we can address the issue of bullying. But it is important that we as communities pull together, because the young people who are committing these unfortunate acts of bullying, they have parents as well. And we need the parents to be partners in these spaces to also reiterate the importance of the education regarding bullying. There was a second question, sir. What was the second part of the question?
The second question is, if the incident happened inside.
You good? Yeah.
The second question is, if the incident happened again, what school will do to be more effective or to differ from currently what you're doing?
Yep, it's super important as a reminder to reiterate what we shared with you. Any case of bullying being reported for more than once to a victim, every one of our schools is responsible to put in a safety plan in place for that young person. It is also important to know that every one of our schools is guided by the discipline code when there is a disciplinary sanction administered to a student who may be the aggressor as it relates to bullying. And some of that can consider, some of the disciplinary sanctions that can be considered is actually suspension as well. So it's important to know that while these other systems are in place, it doesn't disallow our schools from taking a heavy-handed approach and suspending a student where they deem necessary.
Did you have a follow-up, Kevin? Because I had a follow-up. Yeah. Go ahead.
So the follow-up on this is, what do we tell to the parents of the student who was a bully before? For example, the example bullying we're talking about. Was the parents satisfied with the answer?
Was the parent satisfied? Well, Kevin, it's important that we educate parents not only about the preventative measures that exist with bullying. It's also important that every one of our parents are familiar with the discipline code. Very important that they're familiar with the discipline code, because the discipline code clearly outlines the different measures, interventions, and disciplinary sanctions that schools can administer. Some parents are absolutely satisfied, right? And some parents are not so satisfied. So, mixed bag as it relates to bullying, depending on what degree of bullying it is. I hope that answers your question.
I'm sorry, I don't think that answers my question. My question is,
to the parents of who was bullied before the particular incident, was that parents convinced the solution was good, and his or her son who feel comfortable in the school.
Are we talking about a particular student? Wait, I'm not following. I'm sorry.
I was referring to the incident we talked about before.
If a parent's not happy with the resolution?
I was just asking if the parents are happy with the solution. Yeah.
Or
was
not
convinced
happy.
that his son, huh?
If a parent is not happy with the resolution, is that what you're asking?
Solution.
Solutions.
Was
Yeah.
the parents convinced with the solution that their son will be okay now in the school?
Can you say the verb again, Kevin? What's the question then?
So just a few minutes ago, we talked about incidents.
Yep.
A kid was bullied in school.
Yep.
And I assume school did something. Now my question actually is the parents of that kid convinced his kid is safe in that school now?
Yep. And this is okay. And so do the schools follow up with the parents to make sure that the parents are happy with the outcome?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a question.
Chief Rampersant, did you follow that? I was just clarifying with Kevin the question. Do the schools, and I've had this conversation with parents too. Sometimes the process goes through and it's put in place and parents have some element of dissatisfaction with the outcome, don't necessarily feel comfortable approaching the school. Do the schools follow up with the parents in these cases, especially in cases like Kevin was saying of repeat bullying offenses or harassment or physical offenses?
I'll reiterate. Thank you, Kevin, for clarifying. I will reiterate that every one of our schools is required to conduct a thorough investigation as it relates to bullying. And a part of that disposition is to reach out to the parent and provide information regarding the outcome of said investigation, including what we just described, a safety plan for the young person. They share out one of the things that will not happen, Kevin, unfortunately, and FERPA prevents them from doing so, is to share the disciplinary sanction administered to the aggressor if, in fact, they substantiated the bullying situation. So when you ask the question of whether or not the parent is satisfied, one of the things that the parent will not know is the disciplinary sanction that's administered to the aggressor. So I can't say to you whether the parent would be satisfied or not. It's a case by case, and it depends on the level of aggression administered to constitute bullying. David, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think also the parents have a voice in this too. If they want to know and understand what is going on outside of FERPA, they said we haven't received anything. They have access to the escalation protocol on the Respect for All website. They can email Respect for All, and then we can find a response to them. If it wasn't deemed as a material incident, they're not going to receive a response. But if there is, we can put them in touch with the correct person at the superintendent's team to let them know what happened with the incident.
Okay, for now. Yeah. There's a lot of, we could talk about this a long time, and I do want to be mindful of time, but I want to try to hit on a couple of our specific asks from our resolution. And I just want to, for example, the transfer process. And you mentioned, Chief Rampersant, that you need of course, we understand the alleged aggressor in all these cases also has parents. You mentioned we need their partnership in the situation. I think we've talked about this at a past meeting a year or so ago, but parents of the alleged aggressor, they need to agree to any safety transfer for their child. And in many cases, that leads to the victim's family feeling like they have no choice. If the aggressor's parents are not agreeing to the transfer, then the victim's parents feel backed into a corner, and they end up having to be the ones to potentially transfer their child out of the school. We believe as a CEC, that's in our resolution, it's sort of a shortcoming in the system and the way that the regulations are written. Do you agree with our interpretation?
So I agree that it is not first of all, I'm always bothered when a student who is the victim, the parent opts to move that victim out of the school. It feels like the victim is being victimized for a second time, especially if this is a student who is thriving in their school community and has to now uproot and then move to a new environment where they have to, meet new friends and learn the new environment and then get acclimated to a new school. It is definitely one of the regulations that the chancellor has tasked us to look at. And we are in the process of looking at that regulation to see what other ways can we streamline the process. I can tell you that it will not result in every case of a bullying situation, the aggressor being transferred out of the school. That from the standpoint of student transfer process just wouldn't work well for the system. And when I say work well, that means that the response can't be to move the kid every time the young person is considered, right? And so we
agree. We agree.
Right. So,
only in situations where there's basically no other choice. And I would like to ask you, like, what's the escalation that was required to get to a point where a transfer is kind of the next option? Those are the situations we're talking about, when it's the end of the line, a bunch of other stuff has been tried. There's no better way other than to get one of these kids, other than to separate these kids. That's what we're really focusing on.
So you just described it, right? You said all else failed. That means the school did the safety plan for the kid, right? Other interventions such as guidance and outside support, CBO supports, and other disciplinary measures have been administered, but this young person is still not responding and continues to upset the school environment by their actions, right? Then the school can request for a general education student, request involuntary transfer. That process, it goes through a process. The school just has to show the respective interventions that have been administered, and how the number of incidents student was involved in, the interventions that was administered by the school, the response from conferences from parents, the work that has gone into rectifying the actions of this young person are considered before a involuntary transfer is in place. The problem, Steve, is in some cases, schools consider that to be an arduous process, right? We can't just take the word of a request to involuntary transfer of school without having the background information. Number of incidents involved, egregious acts of whatever by the student, interventions administered by the school, and all of those things, right? And there's always the consideration to ask the parent to simply volunteer to have your child, transferred to another school for a new start. And I'm talking about the aggressor, not the victim, right? And so all of those are the measures that are taken before consideration is given to an involuntary transfer process.
There's a question in the chat we received. Why are students with IEPs excluded from the transfer process?
I don't have all of the factual answers, but it has a lot to do with the students' mandated services being provided. The school to be transferred to has to have those systems in place. This is a state thing, not a New York City public school thing. I will get the response to that, Steve, and I'll get it to your office as to the why students with IEPs have been excluded from this process. But I know that it's got a lot to do with their respective disabilities.
Okay. And just quick, I do want to wrap up here because we've taken enough of your time and our time. On the data, just to be, perfectly candid with you, it would be nice to see, some measures of sort of analysis of what's being done. And I've asked the question a couple different ways, and I don't think we've got a sort of a super clear answer, but I understand you can say what you can say. There's concern that the move away from suspensions in recent years has led to an increase in some of these incidents. And, we talk a lot about the systems in place in schools, making sure teachers and other staff are engaged. Schools are huge places.
Sure.
Stuff is happening all the time. There's no way that the good, hardworking staff of our schools can be everywhere at all times in every place. And also, as you say, with the prevalence of social media on the weekends, it's just, it's too much for the staff. You know, we can't have an ISP for every potential kid
Sure.
and have an adult walking behind every kid at all times. There's, you know, in general, in public policy, sometimes you have to set the penalty at a sufficiently high level so that it discourages, you know, it's not unlike fare dodging on the subway. You know, if the penalty for dodging is not high enough, then people are going to do it. How do you respond to people who feel like the penalties in the New York City school system right now, the move away from suspensions and other traditional disciplinary measures has led to an increase in bullying?
So I would say that I respect everybody's opinion as it relates to what they believe will solve the problem or address the problem of student actions. I can tell you on a personal level, based on what I see in some of the data, especially when it relates to our students who are recidivists, one thing is that a suspension doesn't address the action, right? A suspension doesn't address the action. Addressing the action will address the action, right? Get to the why, get to the what. You can suspend the student all you want. That doesn't correct the action. We have to get to the root of what transpired, right? And just as a point of clarity, if you review the discipline code, you will see that what was added to the discipline code is more interventions before suspension. And that does not mean that you are required to take these respective interventions. These interventions were offered to schools, right, to consider before suspending. There is no school that doesn't have the right to suspend. I want to correct the record. We suspend students for upwards of 1 academic school year, and we've done it several times this year, right? And so that notion that schools can't discipline, that is in fact not correct. That are people who are not reviewing the discipline code. There have been some changes in the discipline code, and one of the things have been added to the code is more interventions and more guidance approach to addressing student behavior, because what we saw is we're suspending. And what's interesting, Steve, it's the same students that are being suspended, right? At some point, when you deal with the fare evaders who are jumping the turnstile and you give them a fine, and you give them another fine, and you give them another fine, what you're going to find is they are not paying the fines. So you can continue to give them fines all you want, and eventually those fines will turn into something different. But what I am saying is suspension without addressing is not going to make the difference. I'm sorry. I don't know who that was, but I apologize. But Steve, I gotta jump.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for your time, Chief Rampersant. We appreciate the conversation, the dialogue, and thank you for reading our resolution in depth, by the way, and responding to it directly. We appreciate
Thank you very much, and good night to everybody. We appreciate your input, and we appreciate you being a thought partner in this space. Steve, we're not done here. We owe you some correction in the data. My chief of staff did share that there was a mistake on the data on our part. We will send you the corrected numbers and corrected information, just so that we are clear. But I am one who stands in front of my mistakes. I apologize for the data mix-up. Have a great night and talk soon.
Thanks so much. Have a good one. Thank you. Next, we'll have our superintendent's report, which will be the fair student funding, the annual required fair student funding update. So,
Prado. Screen. Hey, good evening, CEC 20. Welcome to the annual school budgets engagement session. I'm David Prado, Superintendent District 20, And I'm happy to be here with Ira Kerper, who is our district budget representative representing Brooklyn South High Schools and District 20 tonight. He supports our schools directly with all matters related to budgets and will support us this evening with any budget related questions and concerns. Every spring, the Panel for Educational Policy votes on the New York City Public Schools school budget allocation formula for the following school year, which is known as the Fair Student Funding Formula. In preparation for this event, superintendents and borough-based support staff present the New York City Public Schools proposed Fair Student Funding budget allocations for fiscal year 25 to all community and citywide education councils. The purpose of today's presentation is to review the New York City Public School budget and allocation formula, review Fair Student Funding and the weights for fiscal year 2026, which aligns with the 2025-2026 school year. This presentation reflects our continued approach in how New York City Public Schools is conducting community engagement around our school budgets as it relates to the Fair Student Funding formula. Our goal is to increase our transparency in ensuring that you, as critical community stakeholders, are made aware of how schools are funded and made aware of the resources available to you to better understand your school budgets. I appreciate you joining the meeting today, and we'll dive into this presentation. So today I'm going to be discussing three main topics. First, an overview of this year's overall New York City Public Schools budget and the specific budget for our district, a detailed explanation of the Fair Student Funding formula, and a walkthrough of the new web pages created to increase budget transparency. If you have questions during the presentation, please direct them to the chat. If in person, I just request to hold all the questions to the end. We'll have team members ready to respond to these questions. Questions that we're not able to answer during the presentation will be collected and shared with the New York City Public Schools team, who will then respond, and I'll share back with the group. Additionally, the intention of this session is to collect public comments on the formula for the upcoming school year. I ask that if you have specific feedback on the weights for the Fair Student Funding formula, that you please feel free to share that feedback with the following website, budgetpubliccomments@schools.nyc.gov, and I'll post that at the end of the presentation. The New York City Public Schools team will take public comments received at this email address into consideration in the coming weeks. I'm going to provide an overview of the overall New York City Public Schools budget, where the funding comes from, how our budget is spent, a review of our district's budget, and directions for where you can find school-specific budget information. I'm now going to provide an overview of our overall budget and where the funding comes from. This data is based on the most recent budget included in the mayor's January plan. Our total budget for the 2024-2025 school year is $41.2 billion, or about $32,284 per student in our system. New York City provides most of our funding. For the 2025-2026 school year, the city will contribute $24 billion, or 59% of our total budget. Most of our city funding comes from what we call city tax levy dollars. City tax levy funds are drawn from local taxes, which include property taxes, sales taxes, and personal income taxes. Every year, the mayor proposes the amount of city tax levy funding we get, and the city council must pass the budget into law before the new fiscal year begins on July 1st. $15 billion, or 36%, comes from New York State funding. New York State is our second largest source of funding. Every year, the governor proposes the amount of state funding that we will get, mainly based on the number and types of students enrolled in our schools, and then the state legislature must pass the budget into law before the new fiscal year begins on May 1st. Funding generally comes from income and corporate taxes, as well as property and sales tax. Federal funding comprises a total of $2 billion, or 5% of our funding for this school year. The federal government is our third largest source of funding. Every year, Congress proposes a budget, and the president must sign the budget into law in advance of the new fiscal year, which begins on October 1st. The Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, provides the rules for allocating most of the federal funding we receive. In the previous slide, I covered an overview of where New York City Public Schools receives its funding from, and now we'll shift into how the funding is spent in our schools and across our system. Within our budget, we have mandated costs that must be covered annually, including employee benefits, pension, and debts, as well as state mandated payments to charter schools, non-public, and contract schools. This pie chart represents the major costs. I will provide a brief explanation of each section, and I'll begin with early childhood, which is located on the bottom right-hand side of the pie chart. So for employee benefits, pension, and debt, this overall 12.1 billion pays for healthcare and other employee benefits, pension payments for staff, and then debt payments on loans for school construction and upgrades. For charter schools, we allocate 8% or $3.4 billion for charter schools as mandated by state law. For non-public and contract schools, these payments cover schools and programs that educate New York City students, but are not directly run by the New York City Department of Education. This 2.3 billion includes students with disabilities that attend specialized schools and supplemental services to students who attend non-public schools. The superintendent and field offices and central offices combined comprise approximately 1% of the overall budget. The school operations section pays for non-instructional services that students receive. The $5.2 billion is used to pay for costs, including free breakfast and lunch available to all students, bus routes, loan payments on buildings. This is both new construction and renovations. And this is similar to a mortgage payment. We allocate $1.9 billion to support early childhood. This is all birth to 5 instruction across the city. And then lastly, the largest proportion of our budget is allocated toward K-12 schools and instruction. We allocate $15.8 billion, or 38% of our overall budget, annually to support our schools, which includes general education teachers, guidance counselors, deans, health and school climate initiatives such as gym teachers, Respect for All Week like this week, climate action days, special education, after-school activities, summer school, and other operating expenses. This also includes funding for textbooks, computers, materials, and supplies. And now transitioning from the citywide view, we'll take a look at the budget and funding source breakdown for District 20. So as you can see, in District 20, we have an $862 million overall budget across 48 elementary and middle schools that serve 43,749 students. This does not include District 75, since those programs are not funded through fair student funding. School budgets are comprised of a mix of fair student funding and other funding sources. I'm going to ask to have the directions for how parents and community members can search the new budget website to search specific individual schools in the district on how to access the listing for their school budgets. I'm going to drop that into the chat. So we've reviewed the overall New York City Public Schools budget and the district's overall budget. During the presentation, I won't be reviewing individual school budgets. Those are available on the public website. This slide shows you the steps to find the school budgets from the homepage. I'll give everybody a minute to use this information to be able to load your school-specific budget if you're interested. And we'll also drop the directions to this page into the chat. One note specifically around pre-K centers and charter schools. Pre-K centers and charter schools do not have budget reports on the DOE website. These will only be for the community schools in the district. So who decides how the money is spent? Once this funding is in place within school budgets, principals are responsible for the funds allocated to schools and have a great deal of flexibility in how they spend the funding. These choices are made in partnership with school leadership teams, or SLTs. As principals and SLTs create the school's comprehensive educational plan, or CEP, they identify school-specific instructional needs and priorities and align the school budget to this plan. Principals work with their SLTs to create the school's budget in alignment to the goals and instructional priorities outlined in the CEP. Superintendents like myself supervise all principals in our district through this process and must approve all school budgets and their alignment with the school's CEP. I'll now go into a little bit more depth around what fair student funding is, how it works, and the proposed formula for the upcoming 2025-2026 school year. So fair student funding, or FSF, is the largest funding stream that we provide to schools. In fact, it accounts for nearly 2/3 of most K-12 New York City public school budgets. The allocation of fair student funding provided to schools is based on the number of students enrolled at each school and the specific needs of those students. We make these calculations based on our fair student funding formula, which calculates how we distribute this overall pot of money to schools. Within the formula, students with needs that require more support receive more funding in alignment with those needs. In many cases, schools also receive funding from other funding streams, including federal funding streams like Title I, Title III, IDEA, which is funding focused specifically on special education, or other targeted allocations for specific initiatives. These pots make up the remaining funding within the overall school budgets. As a note, charter schools, 3K, pre-K, and D75 programs are funded outside of the fair student funding formula. Additionally, mandated IEP-related services, including speech teachers, occupational therapists, and physical therapists, as well as one-to-one paraprofessionals, are also funded outside of the fair student funding formula. The money provided to schools from the fair student funding allocation provides principals with significant flexibility, working in partnership with their SLTs to utilize the funding to design instructional programs tailored to the needs of their students within their school community. Funding from the FSF allocation provides for each school's basic instructional program and classroom services. This funding can be used to pay for classroom teachers, including the arts, gym, and cluster teachers at the elementary level, as well as school leadership, guidance counselors, social workers, and administrative and pupil support staff. Additionally, the fair student funding allocation can pay for after-school programs, tutoring, and intervention programs, as well as teacher absence coverages and classroom resources and materials. Now I'm going to take this opportunity to further clarify some of what we have already discussed. So throughout the presentation, I've been talking about the fair student funding and the fair student funding formula. When we say fair student funding, I'm talking about the money that is allocated to K-12 schools from this large pot, not including pre-K centers or District 75 programs. This year, fair student funding is approximately $7.4 billion. The fair student funding formula is the method by which we decide how to allocate that funding to schools. This slide outlines the formula and how we utilize the formula to calculate the total amount of fair student funding that each school receives. I'm going to walk through how we utilize the formula to determine how much fair student funding each school receives and how we determine that specific dollar amount. So if you see the graphic on the top, we're going to move from the left to the right, a little bit of an order of operations exercise here. So first, every school receives a foundational amount, which is provided to every school, regardless of the number of students that the school serves. This covers per school overhead costs, such as the principal and school secretary, but can be used for any purpose. We then fully fund the cost of the collectively bargained salary increases for staff and other personnel costs. We then add funding to the formula for collectively bargained contractual pay rate increases for school staff. Given the new set of collective bargaining agreements, we are looking at ways to update the formula for collective bargaining. Then we calculate the remainder of the fair student funding by allocating a base amount for each student. This is the per capita. And then allocating additional funding based on each student's identified educational needs and instructional programs. It is in this part of the formula that we take into account the weights that we have been referring to throughout the presentation. On the next slide, I'll dive more deeply into the weights that are utilized to determine the specific dollar amount that we allocate per student, so they have a clear understanding of what goes into this part of the formula. I also want to pause here to reiterate that within this formula, we take the time to examine the individual needs of each student to determine funding allocations. We make these individualized calculations for each student aligned to their individual and specific needs and education program to determine how much funding would be provided to that school for each student. So this chart shows the proposed weights for next school year. That means if approved by the Panel for Educational Policy, or the PEP, in April, these weights will be used to calculate the school's FSF allocation for the upcoming 2025-2026 school year. This slide displays the FSF weights for the current school year, 2024-2025, which are proposed to be maintained for the 2025-2026 school year. Here you can see the different types of weights that students can be eligible to receive based on their instructional needs or academic programs. To more deeply understand the weights that we use to calculate that last part of the formula from the previous slide, the number of students per FSF category and their FSF weighted needs. Each student's weighted need is determined by the FSF formula. I'll explain the different weights on this slide. So for 2024-2025, the base weight of 1 was equal to approximately $4,254 per capita, or per student. This per capita is adjusted annually to reflect changes to the citywide average teacher salary. The basic grade weight is allocated to schools for all students on their audited register, the register that's taken on October 31st. And this is calculated by considering instructional programming requirements by student grade level with the distinct weights for K through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12. Funding for academic intervention, or AIS, is determined by student academic performance when a student enters a school, using test scores from their prior year. For schools where students do not have incoming test scores in the lower grades, such as before students begin taking tests or if they do not have prior test scores, we provide funding based on a student's poverty level. Funding for special education is determined by the percentage of time students spend receiving special education services. For example, we have one weight for students receiving services for less than 20% of their week, funding low intensity of services, another weight funding students receiving part-time services for up to 59% of their week, or moderate intensity of services, and then a final weight for students receiving more than 60% of their time receiving special education services, distinguished by the majority service time, a less inclusive special class, or more inclusive integrated co-teaching, or ICT. These special education weights are then also broken out by student grade level with the specific weighting value, again determined based on the cost of providing the instructional program. We also provide supplemental funding that supports students who have been declassified as special education students. This funding supports students in their first year transitioning out of special education services through the post-IEP transitional support weight. Funding for English language learners is allocated based on student grade level, reflecting mandated instructional services, including bilingual and ENL instructional programming. Additionally, we have weights for former Ls who have achieved proficiency within the last 2 years, which is indicated using the state designated term commanding. We also provide funding for Ls with students with interrupted formal education, or SIFE status. Students with this classification receive their respective L weight in addition to the SIFE weight. We also have another category of weights for portfolio high schools. These weights are provided to schools based on the number of students who are involved in these academic programs within each high school. Career and technical weights have different tiers based on the type of career preparation program. Programs that require more resources such as nursing, agricultural and veterinary, aviation technology, automotive, culinary, etc., require industry-specific equipment, higher level of consumable supplies and materials, student internship requirements that are integral to the program of study, and highly specialized and ongoing industry training for teachers. These have higher weights to support that instructional programming. There are also separate weights for students in specialized academic or specialized audition schools and for students attending transfer schools. The transfer school weight is broken out into 2 tiers based on students' age and credit accumulation. Transfer school students who are further behind in credits at the time of admission receive a higher weight. Only students attending high schools are eligible for these portfolio weights. Funding for students in temporary housing provides additional support to schools enrolling students in temporary housing. This has an impact on our asylum-seeking families who are living in temporary housing, providing additional resources to the schools enrolling the STH population. Funding for the concentration of needs weight provides additional funding to schools with high populations of students with significant needs. Research shows that schools that serve higher concentrations of students with high needs require additional resources to provide robust education and appropriate resources and supports to their students. The concentration weight includes factors for proportion of students who are in poverty, students with disabilities, students who are in temporary housing, students residing in foster care, English language learners, and students with low performance as key indicators of concentrations of need. In summary, the 2025-2026 proposed fair student funding weights are unchanged from this current school year. So we just took a look at all of the weights that students could be eligible to receive within the fair student funding formula allocation. I also shared that as we were calculating that formula for each school, we take into account the instructional needs of each individual student within the school as we determine the school's overall budget allocations. In this slide, we will take a look at how each student's calculation is determined. The different types of weights are indicated by color on the right side of the slide. In order to determine the weight for each school student, we evaluate their eligibility for the weight based on data in the New York City public school systems that store key information about students. I'm going to walk through the process for how fair student funding would be allocated for 2 students, Ava and Miles, through the fair student funding formula. Ava and Miles are 2 students who attend a school in our district. Ava is a 2nd grader and Miles is a 6th grader. The orange section shows the grade weight that they first receive. Because Ava is a 2nd grade student, she's entitled to the K-5 grade weight of 1, again shown on the left side in orange. Since Miles is a 6th grader, he's entitled to the grade weight of 1.08. If they were a high school student, they would receive a grade weight of 1.03. The navy blue section shows the special education weight. So both students are students with disabilities requiring special education classroom instructional services. Either SETS or special education teach support services. They could need to receive special class or integrated co-teaching. AVA's individualized education program, or IEP, states that more than 60% of AVA's instructional program is spent in an ICT setting. So AVA is entitled to the full-time or more inclusive special education weight of 1.74, shown in navy blue on the left. Miles's IEP requires less than 20% of Miles's instructional program to be in an IEP setting. Therefore, Miles is entitled to less than 20% or the low intensity special education weight of 0.56, which is shown in blue on the right. Both Ava and Miles are classified as English language learners, or ELs, and this is shown in yellow. Ava is an elementary school former multilingual learner who tested out of EL status within the last 2 years. Because New York State requires 2 additional years of English as a new language service for former ELs, Ava is entitled to the K-5 ENL weight of 0.13. Miles is also a multilingual learner. Miles is enrolled in a bilingual program at his middle school. The school has appropriately coded Miles as enrolled in a bilingual program, in the New York City Public Schools scheduling system known as STARS. And as such, Miles is entitled to the 6'8" bilingual weight of 0.55. Both Ava and Miles are entitled to Academic Intervention Services, or AIS, and this comes with its own category weight, and this is shown in red. Ava is a student in poverty, and therefore Ava is entitled to the FSF Academic Intervention weight of 0.12, which is shown in red on the left. Miles is a student who entered the school in 6th grade with 5th grade test scores that were below proficiency. As a result, he is entitled to the AIS weight of 0.35, which is shown in red on the right. Both Ava and Miles are students in temporary housing, and this is shown in green. As such, they both received the STH weight of 0.12. Ava attends a school with high concentrations of student needs, and is shown in pink. Ava attends a tier 3 school, the highest concentration of need, and is entitled to a weight of 0.12. Miles attends a school with lower concentrations of needs, which does not receive the weight. The concentration of needs is shown in the pink bar at the top for Ava. When you add all these pieces together, Ava's individual allocation through the FSF formula would total a weight of 3.23. Miles's allocation would total 2.70. Using the example of these same two students, Ava and Miles, with the same student needs from the previous slide, we now look at a more realistic example where the weight of 1.0 is equal to around $4,400. Ava's weight of 3.23 is equal to $13,742, while Miles's weight of 2.66 is equal to approximately $11,317 under this FSF formula. You can find the following online on New York City Public Schools Info Hub under reports / financial data and reports. So you can find detailed information about each and every school budget allocation in the form of a school allocation memorandum, or SAM. You can find a summary of each school's total and fair student funding budget along with student and staff counts. You can find a programmatic guide to fair student funding, as well as how the fair student funding allocation is calculated for each school. And you can find all these things online for each individual school webpage under reports / budget and finances. You can also find detailed information of the school's budget based on the different types of funding schools receive. And you can find detailed information as to how the principal has budgeted for the current year, including the number of staff positions and other planned spending. There is a new look and feel to the FSF school web pages. There is a more streamlined look and feel. Dollars up top, and then the register and associated dollars down below. And then beginning of the year, mid-year change, and final amounts for the school year, all on one page. In addition to the current web pages detailing each school's Galaxy allocations and budget summary, a new school budget at a glance brings together data on student enrollment, demographics, budget allocations, and use of funds. The new look also compares school demographic information to citywide averages. Under K-12 funding for this school, you can see the school budget allocations rolled up into major funding categories. You can also see how each of these is a share of the school's budget. For this school, fair student funding makes up 74% of the budget. And under K-12 spending for the school, you can see the budget summary rolled up into spending categories. So classroom teachers, other salaries, employee benefits, and non-salaries, also known as OTPS, or other than personnel spending. So these are supplies, materials, books, etc. All public comments will be reviewed by the New York City Public Schools teams. Public questions and comments related to the FSF formula will be posted on the Panel for Educational Policy website. Analysis and response of each relevant question and comment will be available for review on the FSF website in advance of the April 23rd vote. Questions and comments may be directed to the following email address or phone number by April 22nd, 2025. And if we could drop this email and phone number in the chat, that would be great. So we're going to want to send the public comments to budgetpubliccomments@schools.nyc.gov, or by phone, you can call 212-374-6754. Either one of these places to make comments will have community members have their public comments about this fair student funding formula presentation be noted and analyzed prior to the April 23rd vote. I thank everybody for your time and attention today. And in advance, thank you for sharing any questions. We will gather any unanswered questions and share back responses within a few days. And we can proceed with any questions that folks may have.
Yeah, David, there's one in the chat that was asked. Chat is not letting me advance for some reason. If a student needs a change during the year, requiring, the example is requiring a para for health reasons, or an IEP implementation of additional services, but these services have not been included in the previously approved annual budget, where would that money come from?
This is I'm sorry, this is Ira Kerper. This is our budget representative who's representing.
Do you mind, because someone online asked that question, would you mind just answering it at the podium there? And Kevin can unmute you. 1 second. Just 1 second. Hold on 1 second.
Hi, I'm Ira Kerper.
1 second. Kevin, I can unmute you. You're good.
Okay, so the answer for that is if there's a new para request, that's not part of fair student funding. They need to request it. It's a separate funding that comes, it's called IEP para funding, and the principal will request it from their budget liaison.
And what about just more generally, if anything related, new services required during the year, forget about just the para, just any new services, is it a case-by-case basis, or is there, what's the process?
It depends on what it is, but they would probably go to their budget person at central, at their budget liaison in the
Every school in New York City Public Schools has a budget director who they work directly with to support ongoing funding needs, planning, for these types of things, as well as like working with their annual review for the budget for the upcoming year.
And that money, if there was a mid-year request, that money that's coming from, presumably there at the beginning of the year, there's sort of a pot of money set aside in the budget that's, depending on how the year
Our
goes.
money is reconciled every year, so it's a new pot of money every year.
Sure.
New kids leave, so every year we do a reconciliation.
Sure.
Any kids and any children that need a new para, the principal requests it, probably with the AZ.
But part of the process, which was referenced in the presentation, there are 2 adjustment periods that are made for audited register. So that's the October 31st. And then also for special needs students. So students with disabilities, English language learners, that is an additional adjustment that's made mid-year. So some of the maybe mid-year needs are caught up in some of the adjustments, whether there are less students requiring that funding or if there are more students requiring that funding. And then beyond that, they would be taken on a case-by-case basis, depending on what the specific need would be.
And just so I understand, right, the ability to obtain additional funding mid-year, the source of that funding, that will be like a citywide, pool of funding, or does each school have a sort of a reserve, some cushion built into the budget?
We go to central to get it. So for para money, we'll go to the central and say, this school needs 2 additional IEP health paras.
Okay.
And then we'll request the money for that.
Okay. And then I just wanted, there was another question here. Why is really hard to scroll down? It keeps jumping around.
You can't, maybe mine's not doing that.
Yeah, what was there was another question in the chat, I believe. Sorry, we're just trying to get to the questions in the chat, and the touchpad is very sensitive, and we got that question. And then does Title I SWP increase spending for all students? And is this weight implementation still used?
So the Title I the Title I SWP as well as Title I targeted assistance, either decision that the school makes for using Title I funding is part of that federal funding. So that's that part of that $2 billion overall that's provided to the city. It's not part of fair student funding.
Okay. And I'm just looking here. I'm gonna see if there's any questions on funding. And then there's a couple other questions, and then I can pose those to you as well, David.
Mhm.
Just looking specifically on funding, on fair student funding questions. There's a couple questions, and we take questions from the chat at our discretion, but are you okay with answering a couple other questions? Yeah, there's a couple questions in the chat.
If I can.
Yeah, will the DOE provide student Omni cards to District 75 children who receive bus service so they can attend after school and extracurricular activities?
That's something that we can definitely submit that to the city and get a response. What I do know is that District 75 students who are mandated for busing are provided with that transportation, but we can escalate that question.
And that's in District 75, you mentioned at the beginning, is not part of fair student funding, but
Correct.
that's just a
That
separate.
is a separate allocation.
And then I'm just looking at I mean, there's a question in the chat about IEP. How is IEP noncompliance still so rampant when students with disabilities come in with funding for their related services, ICT, et cetera? Where does their funding go if not to their needs?
I mean, I don't know how that would be. I don't think that's related directly to this presentation, but I will say that, we work with schools, we work directly with principals in the district around supporting students with special needs, having all of their mandated services served. And that is ongoing work. Any parent who is encountering challenges or problems working with their school, having their IEPs in compliance, we work directly with the schools and the principals. So with that type of issue, I would definitely obviously encourage a parent to reach out directly to their principal. And in the case where that's where they're encountering challenges, they can reach out directly to the district office to Bill Chin or Sylvia Jasinski. And we work with schools on a regular basis. I have a couple of people on my staff who we support schools and parents with ensuring that mandated services are provided to students. It's a huge priority of the district and of the city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's another question here, which I like, is what kind of oversight do you provide for principals in terms of the budget?
So the comprehensive educational plan is that whole process, having principals consult with SLTs and make decisions around how budgets are allocated in alignment with those CEPs. The process for evaluating principals by me starts with evaluating those goals and ensuring that the budget that schools have is aligned to those goals and action plans. That's the first step of that.
Mm-hmm. How about the subsequent throughout the year?
It's part of the process.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I always consider goals that schools have set, the action plans that they've made, and how they've, allocated and aligned those dollars to those goals, and to what extent the allocation of those resources have supported the school in meeting the goals, and to what extent other things could be considered, and
Mhm.
that's part of it.
Is there you have a schedule throughout the year when you check in specifically on budget related issues?
That's part of the process.
Mhm.
Yeah, we have scheduled evaluations for all the principals across the
Sure,
district.
broadly speaking, yeah. But
Yeah.
I mean, specifically on the budget, or is it part part of the
budget is part of those scheduled
the
evaluations.
evaluation.
Yeah.
Okay. And what would be the remedies if, let's say, the budget, someone's way over budget? What would be the remedies or the conversation in that kind of situation?
It depends, you
Mhm.
know, there's no hard and fast answer for
Mhm.
what that would be broadly, but it would depend.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, let's superintendent report. John, did you want to, any questions? Any questions, by the way, CEC members for superintendent? Not just about fair student funding, but we good? All right, cool.
That's a big one.
Yeah, no apologies needed.
Actually, I do make two questions.
Go for it.
Next one, funding, say, for non-public school
Mhm.
and non-charter school. I guess it's like for some kind of contract schools.
Yes.
How do we fund it? Is it like a student voucher or just the funding directly go to them?
I mean, the short answer is depends. We could get the specifics depending on what the school is. We could escalate for the specific, you're asking about like the method of payment. Typically, those schools are for students with special needs, whose special needs aren't being served in the public schools, and the New York City school system is paying that student's tuition at that school.
Okay. And there's a big, large portion, I think 38% for the K to 12 instructions.
Yeah.
Is that including the teacher's salary?
Yes. Yep.
That's it, thanks.
Did you want to talk about that one thing? You sure? Okay, it's moving along. It's not necessarily a district thing. It's David, is there someone at the Division of School Facilities, the Department of School Facilities, not the SCA, you know, the SCA and then DS School Facilities and you
The
know,
different entities, yeah.
we have this one school that we're trying to help with their project, and it's being batted back and forth, and the money's just sitting there. And who do we talk to at Division of School Facilities? Is there a particular liaison for the district?
I mean, you can start with me. I mean, I could help figure out
All
what's
right.
going on there.
Yeah,
It's
well-
between SCA and DSF.
Yeah, the SCA says it's DSF is responsible, but that's not what the school doesn't know what's going on. All right, we'll check in offline.
We can just talk after.
Yeah, it's probably not, it doesn't need meeting time, I don't think, but working on it. It's a school district, it's really complicated, and John's been really active in trying to get to the bottom of it, so. Okay. Superintendent report, I think we're on to our second public speaking session. Do we have anyone signed up for public speaking? Okay. And Steve is in person, so we can get him, prioritize him. Steve, did you want to speak? You're signed up, so.
Yeah, right here. But it's going to ask you to unmute, and then you can just press unmute when you're ready. Can you unmute it? Steve, you're muted.
Can you unmute it, Steve?
Yeah, it's asking you right now.
Maybe.
How you doing? My name's Steve Mahoney. I'm a parent of a child in a District 75 school here in District 20, and I'm also an uncle to two nieces and a nephew, also within our district. I signed up there for freedom of speech, and it kind of ties in with that bullying. It just seems that sometimes as adults, if we have a minority opinion, we also are subjected to some bullying. I've seen other CECs throughout our city, if there's someone with a minority opinion. And it's about listening to each other and presenting something, I guess, in a respectful manner. As a retired city worker, I remember going through a physical exam, and the men and women standards were different, and they still are, also in our military. And it just seems interesting. During the epidemic of COVID, we were told to trust the science. And then when it comes to physical abilities, it seems that, is it really fair to that 5-year-old girl as she is in sports and now she's at the college level and someone may have transitioned and competes against her? And it's just like a sense of fairness. It really kind of makes you wonder. But notwithstanding that, our children should not be harassed or bullied. That goes without saying. This is like some of the things that we all learn. Juvenile justice. Governor Hochul repealed a lot of juvenile justice laws that Hugh Carey signed into law as a result of a gentleman called Willie Boskin. And part of the rationale with that is because our children are impulsive, that they shouldn't be held to, say, adult standards. And then it makes me wonder, but if they're going to do a life-altering change, how is it they have the mental acumen to make that decision, but when it comes to holding them accountable for criminal behavior, they get a mulligan, so to speak. Like they're not held up to that same standard. There just seems to be an imbalance in that. And that's like two things that I noticed. The chancellor was speaking about money. I went to a city council meeting, and there were like 4 parents, but there was a lot of people addressing the special education aspect of the funding, and it's really a daunting task. A lot of money goes to parents that have to get services in private schools because the city doesn't meet their obligation, and then the city seems to have a hard time paying them for services they had to lay out of pocket. And this is families that have the means to lay that money out, whether it's 20, 30, 40,000 a year. Many of our parents don't have that means, and that just is something that there's some inequity there. And that's pretty much it, Steve. And I want to commend you. I remember last year, you defended someone's right to speak that didn't have a popular opinion, and that's what we're supposed to do. If we as adults can't do it, how are our children going to learn how to have these conversations? Thank you.
Anyone else signed up to speak?
2 more people.
Okay.
Joyce and someone named Tim. I think they're online.
Okay. We've got 2 others. Do you remember who was first? Any way to tell?
There's what it said. Yeah.
Okay. It's okay. We'll just go to both of them. Yeah. Joyce was?
Yeah.
Okay. So next speaker up is Joyce Shi. Joyce, you there? Can you hear us?
Yes, hello. Hi, Steve. Hi, Dr. Prilo. Our old friend and new friend. This is Joyce. My name is Joyce. I'm presenting City Council Susan Zhuang's office tonight. We just need to get update. Also, it's night. Today is last day. We usually celebrate the Lunar New Year celebration. So also happy Lunar New Year for everyone. Also, this month we also have Black History Month. And I think this week many schools doing the respect for all. My kids get have fun for this whole week. I prefer the kids when they learning have fun. They will enjoy the learning. So the little update is for our city council's budgeting too. City council's capital funding, if we apply, I just want to remind that every parent or have principal online. If the parent online, do you mind remind your principal? Just remind them our city council's capital funding ending. If you only reply city council and board of president, the deadline is February 25 p.m. If only city council's capital funding is March 20, also Thursday 5 p.m. So this is just an update because now February 20 is coming soon. So budget is every school's, I think it's key point. I think Dr. Prito also talking about budgeting tonight. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Joyce, and with a cameo from my buddy. Next speaker up is Tam. Just all I see is the name is Tam, T-A-M. Are you there? And
I'm here. Hi.
hi.
I had thank you for taking the questions in the chat, by the way, Dr. Preto and Councilmember Stowe for doing that too. I appreciate it. I just had kind of an ask, I guess. I'm curious about the oversight, experiencing as a parent of a student with multiple disabilities with an IEP since, 2 years old, going through the process. He's an 8th grader now. not all SLTs are alike. I'll start there. I think that that's where a lot of the oversight comes from. We get to see the budget and we're privy to that, but we're not always privy to that. We don't always get to see it. I've been serving on an SLT for a few years. I still have not seen the budget. And that's a very opposite experience from the previous school where I was on the SLT. So I'm wondering if there's a broader training, more deep training that the DOE can offer for SLT training for schools. I've seen some really empowered SLTs that get stuff done, that care about the CEP, which you referenced, that actually look at it. How is it funded? How is it in alignment? How are the goals? How is the CEP not protected, but how is the budget in alignment with the CEP? How's it supporting the CEP? That's what we're supposed to be doing as SLTs. So there's a discrepancy and there's just a difference across the board with how SLTs are operating. And I feel like there is very little accountability sometimes with the administration, with the principals, especially when it comes to SPED, when it comes to related services, when it comes to sets, when it comes to ICT, having 2 teachers in the room. The money's there. If you look on the paper, it's supposed to be. But if you're not getting those services, and it's not just one student, but it's a lot of students who are getting missed services, who don't have 2 teachers in the room for quite a lot of periods, where did their money go? If you're looking at for student funding, but also just student funding in general, if you have those things, you're coming in with the money to cover it. So it just feels fraudulent. And it's a systemic problem, which is, the system's fraught with challenges, but I'm wondering if maybe that can be the first step, is looking at how SLTs are empowered, just so they know their rights and they know what they can do to look at the budget and say, hey, this isn't right, or this looks great, or can we ask for more money here? We need it. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. And we have the next speaker is Stephanie. Stephanie, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm calling as both a parent of a 6th grader and a teacher in District 20, and I'm really calling to speak in regards to the resolution for putting geometry into middle schools. In my opinion, the focus has always been really to teach for understanding, and we want our students and our children to genuinely understand concepts being taught, where we're sent to meetings where we're trying to streamline it to be consistent from elementary school through middle school, so that these students are prepared in high school to genuinely understand concepts and not just take exams to move forward. By putting an advanced course as geometry in middle school, we're really putting students that in a situation that they're actually at a disadvantage, because teachers will be teaching to answer questions rather than genuinely understand the concepts, because the fundamentals that are being taught in 6th and 7th grade will be lost to a regent, which in the end, you need 31 out of 87 credits to pass, which by no means is 38% competency reason to skip a grade. So by really putting things too early in for our students, we're putting them in a disadvantage in the long run, that they will not have the opportunity to genuinely understand and own concepts, which in District 20, I think we pride ourselves on pushing our kids to not just be able to solve a problem, but actually understand concepts that they could take their skills and apply them in future learning. So I'm not sure where, if there's how that really is going to be addressed, that students will be able to get that same quality education if they're taking these courses in 7th grade, when genuine understanding is needed for them to own and really problem solve all of those concepts.
Thank you.
May I, Steve? Hi, it's Maya. Can I?
Maya, we don't typically, as you know, go back and forth. We let public speakers speak, but Maya, when it comes time for the resolution's coming right up, so you can share your opinions then. But
thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else signed up for public speaking? No, that's good. Okay, that concludes our second public speaking session. I realized I forgot I had two announcements I just wanted to make for my president's report. One of them is that last week, I just have to look up this individual's name, make sure I get it right. Last week, there was a call for CEC members, everyone, and I know a number of you were on the call, with a new office within the DOE. It's called the Office of Policy and Advocacy. And the Senior Executive Director, Katie Jederlinick, I think I got her name wrong, but she's newly appointed. And basically the point of the office, as she described it, is to try to engage parents more effectively. And we all on CECs, we know about our resolutions, we write all the time. And you know, the DOE can read those, they can respond to them. They obviously don't have to do what we say. And that process has worked and in some cases has not worked well over the years. And so this individual, I'm optimistic about it because I'm just an optimist by nature. There were many parents on the call who were less optimistic about it. I think a key point is whether this department actually has the ear of the decision makers, the chancellor and the deputy chancellors in the, you know, across the board. And then they took a lot of questions, and my point was, I think I love the idea. I think the DOE should also not be afraid to, number one, sometimes just say no to a resolution, but just explain why instead of, you know, kind of half-baked answers or poor answers or answers that are not grounded in sort of the type of policy detail that you would expect from a, you know, an organization like the DOE. There was a lot of talk on the call about coming up with some kind of database of CEC resolutions across the city, which I think is a great idea, in trying to, again, just get more exchange of information across different CECs. The office is also, they were asking all of us exactly how they could, the best way to engage with parents. This is sort of an ongoing thing as long as I've been doing this CEC work.
I have to be there at 7:30, but I was wondering if I could stop.
Can we mute Norma? This has been an ongoing thing, you know, parent engagement, and this office sounds like they're going to be taking a little bit of the lead on how to structure those engagement sessions, whether they're big events, smaller events, targeted to single issues, open-ended. We have, you know, CEC presidents have meetings with the chancellor every other month. There's obviously a ton of different, we've heard in the past, sort of targeted meetings with subject matter experts. So anyway, it's encouraging, and I encourage every person running for CEC to, you know, this will be part of the next CEC term more than it will this one. And so hopefully that's a mechanism that will be effective. The woman, like I said, Katie, the executive director, she's said all the right things on the call about being very committed to this. CEC elections are coming up, and Kevin, is it possible to share that? I just want to share a screenshot. This is just from a presentation I've given in a couple different places about the elections. And if you could scroll to the one slide with the dates on it, that's really all I want to highlight, is just remind everyone of the key dates right here. Keep going. No, keep going. Right there. So key dates, February 16th is the deadline. So there's a few more days to register. Candidate forums will be held between February 26th and April 24th. And then voting will occur from April 25th to May 13th. In June, sometime in June, the results will be announced. And then the next CEC term begins July 1st, 2025, and runs for 2 years. I think we've heard, what's the number now, Bill and Sylvia? 28 people so far registered in District 20. So keep those registrations coming in. And then, Kevin, can you also share my browser, or do I need to do that? I just want to show my school's account screen on my internet browser. Yeah, how do I have it pulled up. It's on Chrome.
in these tabs?
It's okay. We don't have to do it.
if you
Yeah.
want to do it.
It's one of the, it's okay. Everyone just go to your New York City My Schools account to register. And if you need help setting up the account, your first stop should be your school, parent coordinator, to make sure to get your account set up. And once you get on the account, everything is very automatic from that point. It's a pretty easy process. So those are my only two comments. Let's move on to the resolutions. Our first up is resolution 3. Oh yeah, here we go. You set this up for me and Resolution 3, it's our resolution on bullying and harassment. It was really the brains behind it is one of our council members. Would that council member like to speak on it, introduce it? Okay. You sure? All right. I'm going to give full credit to Councilmember John Riccatoni. He's been really, he's very passionate about the issue of bullying and harassment and discrimination in New York City public schools, and he's wanted to sort of make a statement about this for a while. And so this is kind of, this resolution is his work finally put down to paper. And essentially, there's two key things, and a lot of this was discussed with Chief Ampersand. One is there's this we've heard over and over again with the safety transfer process, and how it's frustrating for parents of victims who feel like they're the ones being pressured to transfer more often than the alleged aggressors are. And so this asks for an amendment to Chancellor's regulation, to Chancellor's Reg A450, to add the bolded line simply that if there's a case of a transfer having to happen, that it's the aggressor or the perpetrator and not the victim. And then the second key point of this resolution is just about the increase in bullying and incidents that we've seen, and really wanting sort of a high-profile effort to address that. And I'll just share the comments I heard from Chief Ampersand tonight. It's very common to hear back the processes that are in place, but it's sometimes it's difficult to get any kind of guidance or sort of tangible target metrics or things that they're shooting for. And I can understand that. I get it. Like it's you don't necessarily want to commit yourself to something when there's so many variables at play. But we're really saying here in this resolution, we think there's a problem. There's a lot of policies, a lot of complexity at play here, but we think there's a problem, and we'd like the DOE to address it, and at least to be more transparent about laying out some quantitative and qualitative data to say what works in schools and what doesn't. And I don't think we got there in the conversation with Chief Ampersand. So that's something that I think is still very valid in passing this resolution. So those are my comments on the resolution. Did anyone else want to share anything?
Steve, hi, it's Maya. May I a quick comment? In our district, we had exactly, I apologize, we had exactly same situation as described when the bullied student who was a victim was forced to leave the school because the parents of the child who was the bully sort of shared the child's views, probably. And as I said, it's a very diverse district, so we have all kinds of people here. So we can't just put the faith into parents thinking that they're going to take and do the right thing always, unfortunately. So I think this is very, very to the point, and I think that will, kind of close the gap, close the loop here. I think it's very important.
Thanks, Maya. Anyone else want to?
Yeah, I just want to second the statement we made before that
we need some consequences for the person to bully somebody else. It's not like when you kind of raise the, I wouldn't say punishment, but they need to know something going to happen to them that to scare them off from doing it, rather than just say, oh, we can early intervene. Because if somebody is consistently bullying a classmate, I don't think there are much more early intervention we can do to prevent it.
Thanks, Kevin. Anyone else want to speak on this?
I just think that the victim is being victimized twice when they have to be transferred out of the classroom or out of the school. So that's why the voting resolution, I went forward with it.
Thanks, John.
No problem.
One comment I'll make too is, and I said this at another meeting, but I do find that in my experience with the district, these are tough situations, and almost always, and when I've been talking to parents, that the district does a good job. And I think this issue we're talking about here, it's really kind of more macro, and what's happening in District 20 is also happening in District 21 and District 15 and across the city. And you see that in the data. Like our data actually shows that while it's increasing across the city, the proportion of material incidents in District 20 is actually slightly below where it was in 2018. It's basically in line. It's been bumping around. But so, this resolution is not suggesting that District 20 is, an outlier here. We think there's sort of, something else going on broadly and, perhaps societally across the country too. So just wanted to make that point clear. Okay, is there a motion to vote on this resolution? What's that? We can still vote because we have 7 quorum and there's some people online who will vote. But yes, I saw that. And I think she's coming back.
I
Is there
can
a
make a
motion to vote on
motion,
this right now?
Steve. Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. So Kevin, can you take a roll call vote on the resolution to approve the resolution?
All right, roll call to vote on a resolution. Steve Stowe, President.
I vote yes.
Okay. John Ricardo. Okay. Elizabeth Chen.
Yes.
Kevin Zhao. Yes. Mei Fan Chen. Wei Min Chen. Okay. Yan Qin Chen.
Yes.
Alina Chris.
Yes.
Okay. Yep.
We heard you, Lena.
Yep. Sabrina.
Oh, Sabrina's not here. She had emailed me and said she's not attending.
Okay. Fabiola. I don't think she's around it. Okay. Maya Rosenbaum.
Yes.
She said yes?
Yes.
Okay. Tamara Stern.
She's not attending the meeting tonight. She's absent.
All right, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 yes.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. The resolution passes. So next up is resolution 4. Where am I?
Oh, it's such good.
Thank you. So resolution 4, the geometry resolution. I just want to quickly introduce this one. It's something that I've already chatted with the superintendent about it, so he knows about it. I just really wanted to put this into writing. I want this to be made public. This is something that I'm very interested in, and I think is it's the right thing to do for a segment of students. I'll sort of share my views. I very much appreciate the teacher and parent speaking earlier. But by no means does this kind of resolution envision, one, being forced on all students, regardless of whether it's appropriate for them or not, or two, does this resolution definitely does not imply not understanding material. I would never suggest that we need to accelerate kids for no purpose. The point of this is just it's my strong belief that there's a segment of our students who can handle geometry in 8th grade. And so that's the ask here, is that we just consider how that could be done in District 20. Just to walk through it, it really starts from this idea that math in particular is the most structured academic pathway compared to some of the humanities. And so there's, when it lends itself to a conversation about acceleration and sort of ability and grade level. And so the typical definition of acceleration, I know some say that, algebra in 8th grade is acceleration. This resolution maintains that acceleration is geometry in 8th grade, because in high school, the most advanced math students could presumably take courses beyond calculus. And so the traditional roadmap for advanced students is calculus senior year of high school. This resolution posits that there's even more, and there's even more that students can do: differential equations, AP stats, multivariate calc, theoretical coursework, independent study, AP computer science, all kinds of things that a cohort of students could move on to in high school if they've had this type of education foundation in middle school. The resolution also pushes back on the idea that, we talk about getting credit in high school. Some high schools will give you credit. Not all do. I don't think that's a bad thing. If taking a subject, again, I don't think is a bad thing at all. In some ways, it can actually strengthen your knowledge and your ability and your confidence in that particular subject. There's a clear need within our, if we talk about the broader societal impact, a lot of people say there's a shortage of STEM graduates. There actually isn't. There's a very broad graduate of STEM grads in this country from higher education. But in terms of the most advanced skill set, that's where it's somewhat lacking. And you can see that in the data on doctorate and master's degree programs in STEM. 50% of those graduates year in, year out are non-citizens. And a lot of times those citizens will take their degrees and go seek employment back home. And so, I think this, I'm just talking big picture now, national and kind of societal. I think we need to do a better job of creating a pipeline of the most advanced and capable STEM students within, U.S. citizens who will obviously bring their skills to and sort of stay in the country. There's a really interesting study I read for this by the RAND Corporation about mathematics education in middle school and high school. And they had a chart that we've cited in this resolution showing geometry, and it's offered across the nation and its prevalence in middle school. And nationally, 24% of middle schools offer geometry. New York State was, of the states they cited in their table, New York State was the lowest. Only 6% of New York middle schools offer geometry. 11% in California do, 14% in Texas. Florida has a very focused program on it, and almost 70% of middle schools in Florida offer geometry. But the bigger picture here is just 24% of the country middle schools offer geometry. New York State should as well. And then I do point out that there's several other middle schools throughout New York City that offer geometry as an option in 8th grade, including some schools in District 21, our neighbor, IS 239, IS 228, including several schools in Queens, District 26 and District 28 as well. And then finally, as a selection for this program, very much make it student-centered. What's right for the student? And as I said at the outset of this is not envisioning kind of, pushing, thousands of kids into this program. This should be based on a screened process, using a test, using grades, using teacher assessment of the student, and then sort of a conversation with the parent or guardian as well. So the ask is very simple, asking of our superintendent, Dr. Preto, to add geometry as an option for middle school students in District 20. So I've talked enough. Anyone else want to say anything on the resolution?
Hi, Steve, it's Maya.
Go ahead, Maya.
Hi. I just wanted to share a story because I have two children. One was in private school, which is Big Apple Academy in District 20, actually. And my other child was in Brooklyn School of Inquiry, which is public school. And my older child was offered geometry and successfully took it, passed the region for geometry, and went to high school already with two regions, Algebra 1 and Geometry, and went right into Algebra 2. My other child, passed Algebra 1 and went to, and went to high school without, and took Geometry in high school. So first of all, the course is, the course is very, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's not nuclear science, definitely. And the previous speaker said, that we should focus on thinking and children, all the foundation, blah, 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 all the loud words. But I think that this course is really doable for middle school student who is fairly advanced. District 20 has historically a lot of population with kids, with parents who focus the kids on STEM. So we have very capable student body in District 20, and parents across different communities are endorsing additional courses like this. So just in my case, I want to say that you can see that private schools are offering geometry and public schools are not. What is it telling us? It's telling us that geometry in middle school is sort of privilege of kids in private school, which is not right. We should be able to offer kids from families who are not, affording private education, same opportunities. So I think it's also that in mind, we should keep that in mind, that when kids come to college, kids from District 20 should be just as good as kids from just as in a good level as kids from private schools. Also, geometry in middle school affords to be more advanced for SAT preparation. So if child did a geometry in middle school, those concepts are already in PSAT and in SAT. So I also think it will allow the better scores. So I think I said enough, Steve.
Great, thank you, Maya. I always feel compelled on these kind of things too, to say that my kids would not have been a target for this at all. My boys, I love them. They're very average math students. And so this is truly something that I strongly believe benefits a group of students. And I believe in advocating for groups of students that are not my own. So anyone else want to make a comment or?
Steve, I have both a question and a comment, but.
Yep, go ahead, Alina.
So can I ask the question first?
Yeah.
The part of the resolution, I'm just confused. Does it mean that if they take it in the 8th grade, they get exempt from it the 9th grade or not? Can you just clarify what was happening there?
Different schools have different policies, Alina.
I can speak up, Steve. So Alina, if your child takes region exam on geometry, and why the child wouldn't if the child took the course, and gets 85 on the region exam, SHSAT schools will not will pass this. The child will take next math course. I don't know about other schools. I know because my son went to Brooklyn Tech, and another child went to State Island Tech. Actually, my older child got, I think, 83, and State Island Tech still enrolled her in the next math course. So I think it's like that. I don't know with other schools. I would think that they would follow the suit if the child took geometry in middle school and passed at least 85. Probably other schools are more relaxed.
Maya,
Yeah.
It's the discretion of the high school principal.
Okay.
no matter what the score was that they got on the Regents.
Okay,
85.
there
And what
you
does
go.
that look like in the rest of the district though in practice? Like do a lot, so outside of the SHSAT schools, do a lot of kids get exempt then in the district or not in practice?
In District 20,
Yeah, in 20.
it's really the discretion of the principal. That's citywide. That's not just in District 20.
Right, but I'm asking how it plays out in the district. So in how, like, what are the numbers district?
It's literally a case-by-case basis. We don't have any students who take the geometry. We don't have any students who take the geometry Regents. We have many students who take algebra, the now biology, but living environment before, and now we have students taking U.S. history. I mean, U.S. history, you don't find out whether or not they're going to take it or not. U.S. history is typically an 11th grade Regents, so we don't have any data on that, and we're going to have more students taking it this year than we ever had. But it's we can get more hard numbers, but the short answer is that the 85 is not a guarantee that the student is exempt from having to going through algebra in high school or geometry or any other Regents.
Okay, thank you. So Steve, should I make my comment now?
Yeah, go ahead, Alina.
Okay, so there's a couple things. I think that what the teacher said at the upset is really important. And I think that district-wide, we have to be super careful to not think that faster is necessarily better. And like, I won't get into the details, but I think that's a flaw in the superintendent's program, like taking the U.S. history Regents when you're in 8th grade versus 11th grade. So I don't think that, I think we do need to be super careful about that. Faster does not mean deeper and better. That all being said, I think that Steve's point is really, really, really important. Like, this is not saying that this is for everyone. And I think, that's a really important principle in education practice and research in general, is like everything is highly contextual. So I really appreciate that you said that, Steve, and that it's an opportunity for some kids that may be right and not for everyone, but it's certainly not an imposition. And then the only other thing I would say is that I think, Steve, you alluded to like a robust screening for it that would include qualitative and quantitative data. And I just want to double sign on that. I think it should include both standardized test scores, but also other measures outside of that. So I would hope that whatever screening is used is not simply test scores, but includes some qualitative data as well. And those are my comments. Thank you. Thank you, Steve, for putting this forward.
Thanks. There's a question in the chat, Superintendent, I'm curious to answer. Is there an age requirement with New York State to take the geometry Regents?
An age requirement?
Yeah.
The requirements is that they're enrolled in a course that is on the pathway to take that geometry Regents, and that they have already passed the algebra 1 Regents. Okay. So they have to take algebra first, and then they take geometry.
Here's a question we don't have to belabor this too much because the details are getting into the weeds here, but I'm curious about your thoughts on the geometry Regents first and 7th grade, and then algebra Regents first and 7th grade, and then geometry in 8th grade, versus certain students taking geometry class in 8th grade and algebra class in 8th grade on a pathway.
Same time?
Yeah, same time.
I mean,
any quick reactions?
My quick reactions is that's too much for one student.
Because it would make the rationale of 6th and 7th grade, it would be a more foundational work. It would be more of a traditional 6th and 7th grade foundational work, if you want to look at it that way, and then say the advanced stuff.
Geometry is like a specific course in geometry only. The 6th, 7th, and 8th grade curriculum engages students in geometry units. Going through up into 8th grade. That's the general education geometry curriculum. This would be pure geometry all year, and then also pure algebra 1s specifically for the Regents at the same time. I mean, that would be.
I'm not advocating for one or the other. I'm just curious. I was chatting with another teacher.
Kind of along the lines of what Alina was alluding to. Like, that sounds like a different version of like way too fast all at one time.
Yeah, just curious. Okay. Anyone else want to comment on the reso?
I want to make a comment. So the last whereas in selecting students, I really think that maybe you shouldn't say you're selecting students, like, since we're putting this program out it should be students' own interests, selecting them as their own option. And I kind of don't like saying urges the use of a screening process. I feel it's like archaic. And parent and guardian consent. Because why can't the students themselves, if they show like a specialty, they just go in and pick the course themselves?
Yeah,
without needing parent consent.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fair point. Elizabeth, what would you like to see here? Would you like to see student consent as well?
Oh no, student selection themselves. Like if they have an interest in geometry, then they pick it themselves instead of you saying selecting students.
Yep.
Because that's their choice.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to make this program for students that are interested in it for themselves, not because their parents are pushing them.
Right.
Or,
Yeah, no, that's fair. But how do you have
I don't know.
Let me look at this too. I know what you're trying to say. I still think we can keep I mean, when we say selecting, it's not like, it's not like we're going and saying the student has, you're in and you have no say in it. But later on in this, the criteria here, I think we can incorporate something of what you're saying. Urges the use of, I mean, does adding the students,
interests,
the students' input?
Own interests, because sometimes like grades might not reflect how well a person could do in geometry.
Right. And so a lot of this, by the way,
Screen is the wrong word,
teachers
Steve.
know the students really well.
Maybe screened is the wrong word, Steve, if you just say like a comprehensive process or something.
Elizabeth, if I say students demonstrated interest?
Yeah, maybe
I was putting parent guardian consent in there to protect against a situation where a parent might think their child is too overloaded with stuff, not ready for this, and the parent says, you know what, thank you for the offer, but I don't want Steve to be taking, that's what the thinking was in there. It wasn't to be like, let's get all the tiger moms out there and give them the sign off.
I'm just feeling this is like a course that we're just putting out there is not for everybody. It should be their own self-interest of what they want.
Absolutely.
So that's why I'm just thinking the wording sounds very like you said, tiger mom or pressure, peer pressure.
How does it look to you right now, Elizabeth? Does it look, so whereas in selecting students for geometry in middle school, this resolution urges the use of a screened process using a test, grades, teacher assessment, student demonstrated interest, and parent guardian consent.
I just feel like it doesn't sound like it's open to every student that might have an interest. It just sounds very like us, oh, it's the honor school and only the honor students go in. That's my kind of feeling.
Actually, Elizabeth, it is. Like we don't think every eighth grader should be accelerated.
I know, but even some students that they might not do well in a better subject or in another subject, they might actually, with their own interest, do very well in geometry. That's what I'm just.
Can I make a suggestion?
If that's the case, would a student have a bandwidth to do the geometry, or they should more focus on improving their other subjects?
Yeah, we could say that.
Elizabeth, I didn't focus. I just focused this one on math. I mean, there's a whole other conversation about all the other subjects that, honestly, it's considered more difficult to figure out how accelerating some of humanities. It's just a different ball game than the math program, but I want you to be comfortable if you're, and I guess if we vote, we vote. But
for me, I feel like it should be,
And remember, this is like the idea here. Anyway, this is, let's.
Alina wants to make a suggestion.
Go ahead, Alina. Did you want to make a suggestion?
No, all I was going to say is try to incorporate what Elizabeth is saying, maybe just say something about process, because what I thought I heard you guys saying is she wants a process for the kids' input to matter, and you want a process for some kind of like teacher input / performance input, but you could just say something generic like a process.
Yeah, Alina, what I added to the, I know you're not online here, you're on your phone, I think, but I added a line that says student demonstrated interest.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, if you guys want it to be more generic, you could say yeah, that's fine.
I think that it's
Anyone
mine.
else comment?
I think that we don't have to give schools the directions of how to pick students. I'm
Yeah.
sure they will find the effective way, and they have their own processes for that.
And I like, yeah, and Maya, to that point, like, I definitely feel strongly about the process we've laid out here. This gets into conversations with Superintendent Preto, and he has ultimate say over this. And, it's like a lot of conversations we've had in the past, but this is what we would like to see. And how it goes from here, to your point, is, that's kind of the next step. But we just really want to make a statement about this. And I think I personally, I strongly believe there will be a lot of interest in the district. And I hope you'll take it seriously, Superintendent, and I think you will. And so, is there a motion to vote on this? Second? Kevin, can you take a roll call vote?
All right. We're taking a roll to vote on resolution number 4 to create geometry course for middle schools. Steve Stowe, President.
Yes.
John Ricardo.
Yes.
Elizabeth Chen.
Yes.
Kevin Zhao, yes. Mei Fan Chen. Wei Min Chen.
Yes.
Yanqing Chen.
Yes.
Alina Lewis.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sabrina, I think she's not around, right?
No.
Okay. Fabiola, she's not around. Maya Rosenblatt.
Yes.
Yes, okay. And then Tamara is not around. Okay. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 yes in person and 2 yes online.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. The resolution is approved. So let's approve our minutes from the January meeting. So the minutes have been previously sent around to CEC members. Are there any changes to the January 2025 calendar meeting minutes? Okay, and I think we've all had a chance to review these, right? So so if there are no changes to the calendar meeting minutes, then the minutes are approved. This concludes the agenda for the CEC 20 calendar meeting for February. Is there a motion to adjourn the calendar meeting? Second, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Would anyone like a break before the business meeting, or do we want to go right to the business meeting?